Looks like we're into a new season of Victim Roulette. This time it's Asians. That's right, the black people are on hiatus for a little bit so that we can dwell on how Asians are now the most hunted people in America according to your mainstream news sources. Last week, some Yahoo went out and killed 8 people. 6 of them were Asian. According to CNN, 2 were other. check. Last week, 6 Asian women and 2 others. They don't really care about the others because that wasn't part of the narrative. Right now, the narrative is to inject as much fear and to sow as much division into the population using one specific race group. It's usually been black folks. Now that dial has been turned over to Asian people. And if you read a headline like this one, you'd be under the assumption that there's this new wave, maybe not even new. They're going to imply that it's always been there, that Asian people are getting gunned down every single day, according to this stuff, if you try to read in between the lines. And they're saying how, hate is haunting Asian Americans. Okay, so there's a specter all around them, and it's obviously going to tie into the whole COVID narrative and all this, that, and the other. But their fear underscores a racial reckoning that is far from over. The whole way this whole thing works is that you take an incident, usually a very isolated incident, and I'm starting to really question a lot of these mass shootings now, honestly, and I'll demonstrate why a little bit later here, but I'm starting to really wonder just how much of this is exactly the way they say it. I mean, they lie about everything, so why wouldn't they be lying about this? Not that people aren't out there killing each other. I mean, killing people is humanity's favorite pastime. That's not a shocker. It's the way they approach this thing that makes it sound like there are these individuals out there who've got this racial fury in them, and they go out and they start massacring people based purely on their skin tone and nothing else. They brand this hate because apparently if you kill somebody without racial motivations, I suppose it's not hate, but they want to brand that specifically a hate crime, as opposed to the more usual wholesome murders that are done with the best intentions, I suppose. But that aside, that's the main headline now. You turn anywhere, even the stories they've got queued up here about the Atlanta mayor saying how this spa shooting has to be categorized as a hate crime. You got Biden talking about hate crimes, and now, on and on it goes. And then they start to bring up all these random incidences. I did just a random search on YouTube for the CBS network, and sure enough, they're queuing up their Asian hate stuff consistently. There's this thing about an elderly woman who's Asian who was attacked in San Francisco. Scroll a little bit beyond that, and you've got lawmakers call recent attacks on Asian Americans racist and wrong, as opposed to other kinds of attacks on people that are not wrong. I don't, these stories are just so dumb that you gotta wonder how much thought goes into these headlines now, or if they're just purely meant to elicit some sort of reaction. So if you say the words hate and you tie it to a specific race group, then you've got the recipe for something special. But apparently this killing of primarily Asian folks last week has sparked nationwide protests. Those are the kind of protests they love to cover. And out in Atlanta and throughout the country, you had all this outpouring of emotion, let's call it, for people stepping up to fight back against racism. I wonder if on some level we need to start being relieved that the narrative has shifted back to mass shootings, because I thought that shit was over in 2020, and I thought we were just going to keep selling the COVID fear porn, but seems like we're making a comeback, and they couldn't go back to the old well of white supremacists going out and massacring black folks. They had to turn that a little bit, give the narrative a little bit of a shine, add to the reasons why everybody hates everybody else. But the label now is anti-Asian violence. You're going to hear that phrase tossed around a lot, and when they're done with that, they might circle back on Jewish people or something. It's always the same shit, different day. This is nothing new. There's nothing groundbreaking about any of this. And if you read their stories, they could have written this years ago, because it's always just the same shit. It's always just the same shit. But check this tweet out from CNN. What can people do to be an ally to communities of color in the fight against hate? Tweet us your suggestions, says CNN. How can people be an ally to communities of color. See, you have to first put these folks in a community. So you gotta wrap them up in a nice little bow, and it's not a human experience. Oh no, it's a distinctly Asian, distinctly black, distinctly Jewish, distinctly some people of color. Hispanics haven't had their day in the sun just yet, but it may happen, I don't know. White people never will, because they're usually the perpetrators of all of this violence, according to your local news and your CNNs of the world that preach this message across the entire world. So halfway across the world, you got people looking at this thinking that white people in America have gone on a rampage to purge themselves of all other races in this country. They don't have Donald Trump anymore to be like the totem villain for all this nonsense, but they're still going to bring him in any opportunity they get, because check this out here. In the last year, Asian Americans have been the target of verbal and physical assaults because of misguided coronavirus fears, and after former President Donald Trump repeatedly referred to COVID-19 as China virus or the Kung flu. So you gotta bring Trump back in here just for the shits and giggles. But you know a story like this would have been a lot steamier if Trump was still in office. They would have loved to pin this on him. They would have loved to crucify him. They're still gonna try to do it, but when he's this far away from the office, it's hard. It's really hard. But they'll keep trying, so keep an eye out for this stuff, and mass shootings in general. Because the reason I'm starting to question these events is if you do a simple Google search of surge in mass shootings, and I picked this up from Reddit earlier today, you will find a variety of stories regarding mass shootings in different states. Pennsylvania, Florida, Tennessee, but notice that they're using the exact same picture for these stories in different states that are apparently facing record mass shootings. And then, it's practically the same headline, except their bot switched out the name of the state. Like, how fucked up is this? Seriously. This is so embarrassing. Mass shooting surge in New York as nation faces record high. Oh, what a coincidence. Because the mass shootings have surged in South Carolina as the nation faces a record high, and in Indiana, and in California, and in New Jersey, on and on and on. This thing's gonna hit probably all 50 states. Like a bot's writing this shit, for God's sakes. It's how lazy these people are. They won't even make shit up and use a different headline. They're using the same headline and just changing the name of the state. This is embarrassing. It is absolutely embarrassing. They have no scruples, they have no dignity, they have no sense of purpose anymore. They're just phoning it in. They're phoning in their propaganda. How lazy do you have to be? And it's different news articles, apparently. I dare anybody to perform this search and tell me that the entire news apparatus isn't just one giant tentacled monster. I dare anybody to tell me that after some nonsense like this. How embarrassing does this get, man? Just Google it, surge in mass shootings, and look up the news results. It's the same picture. Golly. So for that reason, I don't even know if this thing with these Asian folks happened. I mean, I'm gonna assume it did. I know they're gonna, twist this around and, even though there were white people involved who got killed along with all the Asians, it's still gonna be considered a hate crime and all this other shit. To preserve whatever's left of my sanity, I'm just gonna assume that this rampage actually happened. But at the back of my mind, I'm just like, fuck it. Like, none of this is real. I mean, why would it be real? This little search grid tells you everything you want to know. Everything you want to know, and more. Just try it yourself, see what happens. But because of the mass shootings in Atlanta against Asian Americans who are now on the Hunger Games menu, it's open season on Asian folks if you believe the news. And so there are protests that have stirred up about it, and the news will always give the most attention to the narratives that offer them the most amount of control. Because there were protests this weekend, make no mistake about it. They were huge protests this weekend. Just ask NPR, one of the few mainstream networks to still cover this story. All around Europe, pretty much all around the world, but they're only going to give credit to Europe. There were the "we're not going to take it" protests everywhere. Thousands of people showed up. A lot of them got the shit kicked out of them, but that didn't make them back down. Everywhere from Austria, Britain, Finland, Romania, Switzerland, and more. Way more. And even NPR will give you a hint that it's possible that the whole AstraZeneca debacle last week, that's still continuing, as we're going to get to here in a little bit, still going on, that seems to have, according to them, deepened distrust against the governments out there. Germany being on the receiving end of the biggest one of these, because they were one of the first countries to put a halt on it, and that made the general public go, aha! The good old NPR, they got to stick in their propaganda, because they're talking about how after a 3-day pause using AstraZeneca, Germany is now trying to right the course, okay? Apparently it wasn't righting the course when you stop this untested, unproven shot into the general population and it's causing blood clots and you pause it. That's not the right course. The right course, according to this, is, according to Angela Merkel, or Angela, the motto is vaccinate, vaccinate, vaccinate. That's what Angela said. So obviously the narrative out there is they're gonna shove it down people's throats one way or another. But imagine, this is supposed to be a story about the lockdowns, but they're gonna hijack it to bring up some more vaccine confidence. But whatever. There are a ton of people out there who took to the streets, who said that they were, oh hell is all this crap, who said that they weren't gonna be a part of this nonsense anymore. And it's encouraging to see so many people out there just fighting back. So salute to the restriction protesters. A lot of them got hurt. I mean, we're gonna probably have to dedicate some time into seeing some of just the wackiest videos out of there, but a lot of them got really hurt. Police out there, they're not fucking around. But to salute to these folks, because pretty soon, they're gonna use this as an excuse. Good old Bojo Johnson out there, the COVID survivor, he's trying to make it, let's just say, a little bit more difficult to voice your opinions out in the UK. I mean, the UK has slipped into tyranny like something I'd never expected from them. Of all the countries in Europe that I expected the newest embers of fascism to come from, I would have never guessed the UK, but here we go. And I think this is still punishment for Brexit. Like, you get punished for this stuff. This is just the elites clapping back. They've been clapping back since 2016 and they're still clapping back. So pretty soon he's going to be proposing a bill in Parliament. These are the folks who don't even meet in person anymore. They'll probably just do some virtual vote thing under fears of COVID now that they're all locked down. But apparently they're going to call you a serious annoyance if you're trying to protest for whatever reason. And they could lock you up for up to 10 years. That's on the menu, folks. That's on the menu out in the UK. If you're out there and you voted for Boris Johnson expecting that he'd be the thing that was going to deliver Brexit and usher in a new era of democracy out there, well, joke's on you, isn't it? There's a part of me that's hoping they try to pass this and it serves as the final straw to the British populace and they just snap back and they just go ape shit out there and they just tear up the streets and go after good old Bojo at number 10 Downing. Something similar to what you saw in the Capitol, but for all we know, they'd probably stage that all over again just to make sure that a law like this passes with the help of the military and other nonsense. So the narratives just keep getting worse, man. They just keep getting worse. These people are getting crazier. But I appreciate that people are starting to fight back, that they're making their voices heard. And, you know, you don't just protest by protesting. Sometimes you protest by partying, which is exactly what's going on in Florida right now. Hordes and hordes and hordes of maskless youth dancing on the streets, fighting against cops. I mean, shout out to these folks as well. Shout out to any kind. Oh, Jesus, look at that, man. Jesus Christ. You see, I gotta play that back. Look at this tackle. Boom. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Where's the protest for that, huh? Where's the police brutality on that, huh? Florida, probably one of the last free places on Earth. Forget about free states in America. It's one of the last free places on Earth. has just been overrun by this, and I gotta wonder if this is some other kind of psyop, to punish Florida for being open, and now they've got this curfew and all these stories about, people acting up out there and rowdy youth, and, it just feels staged. All of this just feels very staged. I mean, right down to the guy on top of the tank holding up a gun, and, she's pretty. But, it just feels like this is back to the whole Capitol riot thing where, you have these, let's just call them impressionable people, and you just go in there and you throw a grenade and just see what happens. And using that, they're probably going to use it to pass more laws, pass more nonsense like what you're seeing out here in the UK with Bojo saying you can get 10 years for being locked up. So I don't know. Could we see DeSantis try something similar in Florida? Oh, who knows? But all they need is an opening. It doesn't take much. It really doesn't take much. A couple of rowdy youth here, there, and everywhere, and you've got a recipe for something pretty good. But it warms my heart to see just all these people not wearing masks, not social distancing, not caving into the new normal. It's a form of protest. Yeah, it's probably been hijacked already, but it goes to show you that there are a lot of people out there that are they're not going to take it. So salute to the protesters. A shout out to the spring breakers, even though they're a bunch of spring breakers just doing some really, really stupid shit. But at least they're doing it as a free people. So good for them. Good for them because the shit just keeps on rising elsewhere. AstraZeneca, on top of the debacle last week with all these countries that pulled the plug on it, and a few of them, it sounds like Germany is one of them that's back to trying to administer it. Denmark have rolled in with their own case study, this time talking about how 2 people suffered some sort of brain hemorrhages. One of them was in their 30s, so someone who's not really at risk age-wise anyway from COVID gets smacked down by this vax and is in pretty bad shape on top of the other folks who've already died. And I'm going to guess that the reason we're able to really pin this on one particular vaccine is because they're only using one particular vaccine out in Europe, and that they don't have as much of a centralized medical system as you do out here in the United States. And in the United States, you got 3 different vaccines, so it's going to be very hard to narrow down the horror stories to just one of them. But Europe just have the one for the entire region or most of the region, and so that's why you're seeing it having the most amount of trouble getting rolled out over there. If they had Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson, you'd probably see similar stories about that too, if it was just one vax across a wide array of people. But the narrative keeps eroding. They keep coming up with these stories, and when it's the mainstream folks who are reporting on it, I mean, it says something, doesn't it? You would imagine there's probably a hell of a lot more out there, so for every one that the mainstream quotes to you, how many do you think? 100 maybe? Who knows? But these folks, the message isn't going so hot, and it certainly helped to fuel some of the protests over the weekend, and NPR were quick to try to snuff out that fire. But on top of all that, there's apparently some sort of vaccine war, which we touched on last week. Last week it was that America were hoarding all the vaxes and Europe couldn't get their dose, and they were starting to get really upset that the Americans were hoarders. And now apparently the EU are trying to punish Britain in some fashion by restricting the amount of doses that they get. I guess because they're just doing so well. How many people they've managed to give the shot to, I don't know. I don't even know what the beef in the middle of all this is. All I know is that this is designed, like everything else, to drive up demand in this shit. And the EU are now telling Boris Johnson that if he doesn't ship up and shape up and do what he's told in some fashion, that he could see his vaccine supplies dwindle, which in turn would hurt him politically, because as far as this stuff actually saving lives, I mean, God knows. This is all just politics. If I manage to vaccinate half of my population and you've only managed to vaccinate a quarter, that means that I'm a better leader. That's the new contest for 2021, is that who can vaccinate the most amount of people in the shortest amount of time. And they're all getting in on the act. And so while you can simultaneously ban the vaccine for killing people, or at the very least being unpredictable, because that's what they'll at least give you that. They'll say it's unpredictable. They won't tell you that, well, maybe it killed people or maybe it didn't. They'll at least say that it's unpredictable and they don't know what it's going to do. Despite that, they're having an all-out vax war. It's going to be the new Cold War, I guess. We'll see what happens when Sputnik rolls into the rest of EU. Haven't heard much about the Sputnik vax. I'll bet you it's a real keeper just like all the others. But it's a race to the top. Gone is the death tracker. It's now been replaced by the vax tracker and how many people have been inoculated. Don't expect that tracker to go off and show you how many people have been inoculated and still caught the damn thing. But anyway, it's a contest and it's out in the United States too. Even Krispy Kreme are getting in on this. Take a load of this shit. Krispy Kreme are giving away free donuts to everybody who shows their COVID-19 vaccination card, and this is set to go on all year. That's right, get your COVID shot, and then maybe you can get your diabetes shot. Once you keep showing up to different Krispy Kremes with your Vax card. I wonder if they're gonna stamp your Vax card so you can't use it at multiple Krispy Kremes, or if they don't even give a shit, like they're okay with just giving people free donuts. Oh, this is so weird. And you get the original glaze too. They're not going to give you any of their fancier stuff. They're going to give you the stuff that we're going to toss out anyway. But you get to eat it, boost up your blood sugar, make you obese, and make you more vulnerable to COVID, as they would say. There's a delicious irony in all of this, and I do mean delicious. So, Krispy Kreme. It's the carrot, or in this case the donut. You just wait until they bring out the stick. You just wait until you can't even get into a Krispy Kreme without your Vax card, or any of the other fast food joints where you can sit in and eat, or maybe even drive-through. They might ask you to show your Vax card before drive-through, or they might just save you some trouble, you know? Say, hey, we're gonna embed your Vax card onto your debit card or your credit card, and when you swing by to get your takeaway and we swipe your card, it'll tell us if you got your Vax or not, and we'll give you a surcharge for the first few months if you haven't gotten your Vax yet, and then after that, we're just gonna keep your card if we notice it doesn't have your Vax stamp. And then they'll just graduate slowly into like getting it tattooed on your arm or forehead. You know how this plays out. Conspiracy theory is now conspiracy fact. And you got free donuts to prove it. My. Well, that was a bit of a light note to end on, but I got an even lighter one. Apparently this quackabot can't seem to go upstairs of Air Force One without tripping all over himself. Let me look at this, man. 2, 3, boom, boom, boom. And then he finally wisens up and uses both railings. Oh, he saluted. I didn't know he saluted. I haven't watched it that far yet. Oh, he's limping a little bit. He felt that one. Golly. He probably cracked something. Oh, Dirty Joe, Dirty Joe, Dirty Joe. You are not in good shape, buddy. Air Force One. This guy is he's gone. He is completely gone. I mean, the reason I brought this up is that it should give us some confidence that the minds that are pulling all the strings on all this COVID nonsense and the lockdowns and the New World Order bullshit, like this is their guy for now. This is their guy. This is the guy that they decided is going to be the be-all, end-all to sell their narrative. Right here, what you're seeing in front of your screen. This guy who face-planted walking up the steps to his own goddamn plane. This is the guy who the New World Order has chosen to pass their agenda, at least in the interim, until Kamala or someone else can take over. But Faceplant Joe, at least he didn't lose his grip. I guess that's a sign of progress, but man, they're getting worse. They are getting worse. Catch yourself wishing for the days of smooth criminal Obama, or the man of God Bush, who loved Jesus so much that he kickstarted a genocide in the Middle East. You know, you remember those folks. None of them were this. I mean, this is ass in the air, face to the floor, or to the stairs, to the red carpet. At the very end, he makes it to the top, and he gives everybody just that little bit of a salute to say, hey, it's all good, people. It's all good. Oh, Joe, Dirty Global Joe. This man about a month ago was bombing the hell out of Syrians, and he still is. He still is. They're just not covering it in the news anymore because of all the backlash that happened. But this is the guy. This is the guy who's leading the U.S. military, or so they'd have you believe. What a farce. And he was on his way, I guess, to look into Asian hatred. He was on his way to sell the narrative. The deep state said, hey, Dirty Joe, we need you to go out there and talk about hate against Asians, because apparently a massacre went down, and now we gotta convince all the Asian folks that they're in deep, deep trouble. That way they can stir up some more fear. So go sell that message, Joe. Go up there, do it for the team, Joe. Do it for the team. Oh, Joe. Oh, Joe. Joe. But take some comfort in all this, people. They're not as smart as they think they are. Thank God for that.